Hey YouTube. So, welcome to video number 18 of my little NixOS configuration series. Actually, this part will be kind of a concluding episode because we have covered a lot of ground when it comes to the NixOS configuration and how to use flakes and how to really create a multi-system configuration, including deployment options and so on and so forth. In today's video, I want to pick up on one chapter we have kind of covered before. Some of you who have seen all of the videos might remember that we were working with Disko as a partitioning tool for NixOS, and with that we were basically able to make a NixOS installation with just one or two commands. And building on top of that, I want to show you how you can use NixOS Anywhere to install NixOS on a completely empty computer just with booting the installer and then executing the install with one command, or how to install NixOS on a machine that has already running some sort of Linux distribution and actually replace the whole system with your NixOS configuration. And for all of this, we will use NixOS Anywhere. So basically, the goal of NixOS Anywhere is to solve the problem of time consumption setting up a new machine, really. So what it basically does, it reduces the whole installation process to one command, and it will take care of partitioning your disks and configuring and installing NixOS. So you will have a scenario where you enter one command and then you walk away and do something more productive, and you come back and the whole system is up and running. So let's have a look into it. So of course we will use the flake we have used in all of the other videos, and you will find the code on my Git repo as usual. And for those of you who want to test it with the more simple configuration, there is also a how-to guide on the NixOS Anywhere repo, and there are also examples where you can find a basic configuration, a basic disk configuration for Disko, and also a basic flake.nix. When it comes to the flake we have been using, we had a very basic structure here. So we had our flake.nix, and here we had the system configuration for the VM we have been using all the time. And then we had a hosts folder and a home folder, which were basically host configuration and the user configurations. And in order to use NixOS Anywhere, we will create a new host, and I already duplicated the system configuration in our flake.nix file, and I just named it with the -Hetzner because we will do the first iteration on the Hetzner cloud. You can use any cloud provider you want. Actually, the only requirement really is that you have a running Linux distribution that is able to boot into another kernel, and then you are good to go with NixOS Anywhere. So on our NixOS system in our Nix flake, I have added one more option here, which is system equals and then actually the system type we want to install on. Of course, you can also do this on ARM, but in this case, I will create an x86 machine on the Hetzner cloud, and that's why I have put it like this. And all the other parts are basically the same as we had on our main configuration. The only thing that's changing here is of course the import, because we need to create a new host folder in our hosts directory, and I will also show you how we can do that now. So on our hosts directory we had our host folder here, and I will just duplicate that and rename that for our new machine. And in order to have that a little bit more lightweight, I will just quickly make some changes here. So I will get rid of the specializations because we won't need them on the server system. I will also get rid of the secrets. I will also delete the hardware configuration. And on our configuration.nix, I will just make some changes. So of course we will need to change the host name get rid of the unmanaged network interfaces. The X11 keyboard configuration is also not necessary. And for the system packages, NeoVim and Git are fine so far. We will need our OpenSSH server, of course. And of course, we don't need Hyperland here because this will be a server system. And also, we don't need the networking parts we were using when we were doing NixOS containers. And what we also don't need is the services folder, and that's good for now. On our home folder, I will just also duplicate the host file and name it accordingly to our new host here. And just for now, I will remove the dot files. The CLI features we can just leave in. And here we import home.nix, and in order to have my desktop configuration still running, I will just import home-server.nix here instead, and remove the desktop features here, and also remove the Hyperland section. And then I will just duplicate the home.nix and rename this to home-server.nix. And on the home.nix file, we had a section for home packages where we were installing Kitty, Wofi, Firefox, and Edit. And of course, we won't need these desktop apps on our server system. So just to sum up our setup here, we have created a new NixOS system configuration in our flake.nix, where we are importing the modules from host and then our new host name. And that's actually happening here. And this will import the default.nix on our new host name here. And I can see I still have services, specializations, and so on in here. So I will just remove that. We can keep Podman just for testing, so we have Podman available on our new system. And then we basically just had under our username a dedicated file for our machine where we basically just enable the feature sets that we have configured in our home folder, where we can just say which features we want to. And we had duplicated the home.nix into home-server.nix, removed the desktop apps, and now have a clear separation between Home Manager setup for server systems and for desktop systems. And now I can just add everything to our Git repo, and I will just do a nix flag check to see if our configuration is valid and can be evaluated by Nix. And now Nix throws an error because I have removed the hardware configuration. Actually, I have prepared a hardware configuration for this example. And I will show you later on in the video how to generate a hardware configuration with NixOS Anywhere. So we take this for now as a given here. And of course I need to add it to our repo, and I can run the flag check again. And now the check has succeeded, so the structure of our flake is valid and Nix is able to work with it. And now I will just quickly set up a new virtual machine here on the Hetzner cloud, and I don't know, I take Helsinki here and just keep it at Ubuntu. And when it comes to SSH keys on your cloud provider, in order to have NixOS Anywhere working, you will need a root password. So I will just skip the SSH keys here. The thing is, in this case, this doesn't really matter because what we are using here is basically the one-click install of the cloud provider, and we don't care too much about the operating system and security because we will replace the whole Ubuntu installation with our NixOS configuration. And there we have everything configured. So in our flake, we didn't configure root user and we had our SSH keys. And when we are done with the NixOS Anywhere installation, we can securely log into our server and there won't be any security issues. So I will just name this after our host name here, and okay, here I select the x86 architecture and I will just take 2 CPU cores and 4 gigs of RAM. And in order to try this, I recommend at least 2 GB of RAM. And now I can just create my server. And now the server is created. And now I will just try to SSH into my server here. Give it my password. And now you can see I'm logged into the server. And one thing we need to take care about here is the configuration for Disko. So that's basically in our hosts folder under our host name, and then we have a file named diskoconfig.nix. And as you might remember from the other video, and that's also something you can find in the documentation for NixOS Anywhere, the Disko config basically holds the partitioning table for the new system. So in this case, we had our device VDA, and then we made a GPT table with the boot partition, an EFI partition, and the root file system. What Disko actually needs to know is which device should be partitioned here. And the device is dependent on the hardware of the computer and also on the platform your cloud provider uses for virtualization. And in order to find this out, we can just list the block devices on our virtual machine. And you can see in this case, the device is called SDA. So I can just rename this here. And now everything will work. And now I can just close our SSH connection. And to follow along, I will just open up the console on the Hetzner cloud here. And now we are good to go to make the installation with NixOS Anywhere. So I will just head back to my code base and clear this out. And one thing I forgot about here is on our host folder under our host name in the configuration.nix, I didn't change the bootloader here, and on our virtual machine we have been using systemd boot, and this won't work on Hetzner and probably not on most other cloud providers. So we need to make sure that our NixOS system is using grub as a bootloader. So we will just enable grub here and save it. And now I can just execute the NixOS Anywhere command here. So I use nixrun and then give it the GitHub address for NixOS Anywhere, give it a flake flag and refer to the system configuration we have created in our flag.nix. And then I just give it root at and then the IP address of my server here. And now it will ask for my root password. And now it will start building our system configuration. And when I head back here to our Hetzner console here, we can see what happens here. So now it will execute another kernel and it will basically boot into the NixOS installer. And when I head back to my code base, you can see that NixOS Anywhere is already starting to build the system here. And this, of course, takes a while dependent on how complex your system configuration is and how good your internet connection is. And now the installation is finishing. And let's try to have a look here. And now you can see the virtual machine on the Hetzner cloud is rebooting and we are greeted by our NixOS grub bootloader. And the system is up and running now. And now I can just log into this with my username. And you can see we get a little error here because I had configured the fish shell to execute Hyperland on startup. Of course, this won't work because we just quickly repurposed our desktop configuration here. And when we have a look here, you can see the podman command is also available. And yeah, the system is working, it's up and running, and that was basically a one-click install. So we have replaced basically the whole system with our NixOS system now. So the Ubuntu installation is gone, and of course when I try to log into the machine with the root user and the root password, this will obviously not work. But instead what I can do is I can just use the existing SSH configuration I had on my system to connect to the virtual machine we have used before in our flake and just give it the IP address, because the user data and the user authentication over the SSH key is the same, because that was also configured with the system configuration. So I can just edit my SSH config here and just give it the IP address of the Hetzner cloud server here. And when I try to SSH into the server here, you can see this is working. I am logged in now. And when we have a look at the IP address, you can see here that is actually the cloud server we are using on Hetzner. Another thing I have talked at the start of the video was concerning the hardware configuration, and I want to quickly show you how to generate a hardware configuration using NixOS Anywhere. So I will just delete my hardware configuration here, and of course in my configuration.nix, in order to have my flake valid, I need to comment out the import for the hardware configuration. And then I will just head back to the Hetzner cloud and just rebuild the system with the Ubuntu image. And this would just take a moment. And now I can just modify our NixOS Anywhere command here. So what I am doing here is I just give it a generate hardware config flag. And here we give it the NixOS generate config command. And then I basically just tell NixOS Anywhere where I want my hardware configuration.nix to be placed in my flake here. So I can just execute this here and paste in my root password. And now it will reboot into the NixOS installer. And now you can see it generated a hardware configuration here. And now it will start building the system as before. So I can just cancel this here. There's one little problem here. We have generated a hardware configuration, but of course, NixOS Anywhere will try to build our flake, which is without the hardware configuration import here. So we need to stop this operation here. And we need to save our configuration.nix, and where we made sure to include the hardware configuration. And then we need to add the hardware configuration to our repo here. And now we could just execute the NixOS Anywhere command as we did on our previous install that was successful. I just wanted to show you how to generate a hardware configuration. Usually when it comes to the cloud providers, you pretty much don't need to do that all the time. So for example, when you are on Hetzner Cloud now, where this hardware configuration is based on, I can use that pretty much for any machine here. So this will be prepared in advance. And when I spin up new machines, I can very easily just do the one command install because I will already have a hardware configuration lying around. Another way to use NixOS Anywhere is to use a completely empty computer here. And to show you that, I will just quickly create a virtual machine. I have just duplicated the virtual machine we were using for our other videos here, and on the CD-ROM I just gave it the minimal ISO for NixOS, and on the boot options I have just set the CD-ROM boot to position 1 and apply this. And now I can just start my virtual machine and it will boot into the installer. And when I have booted into the installer, I can just set a password here for the root user. And then I can just get the IP address of my computer here. And what I can also do is, as we did before, get the block device here. And now when I head back to my configuration here, I can very easily modify this. So we just changed this to VDA. And now I can just give it the IP address for the virtual machine I have on my host computer here, and just execute the NixOS Anywhere command. And now it will prompt for the root password, and that's something we have just defined when booting into the installer. And just give it the root password. And then it will start doing exactly the same as we did on the Hetzner cloud. So you don't necessarily need to have a Linux already on the system. So let's say when you have a cloud provider or any kind of physical device, it's good enough just to boot into the NixOS installer, check which block device you need to define for the Disko config, set a root password, and yeah, basically have a look at the IP address, and then you are good to go. And that makes it very easy to use NixOS Anywhere, yeah, really anywhere. There's not very much more to using NixOS Anywhere, and of course there is documentation on the Git repo, and as I said, there are also examples, but I think with this video you get a pretty good overview how to use NixOS Anywhere to install your systems. And I find it extremely useful, especially when you do client work and you set up computers for your clients. This is also very handy when you are using flake templates, for example, to have certain technology stacks for servers. So let's say, for example, you want to spin up a virtual machine in the cloud that, I don't know, has a LAMP stack on, or just some other stack you regularly use to set up a system. This can make setting up new machines very, very easy. So that's it from me today. And if you have any questions, just drop a comment and I will try to help. And yeah, see you next time. Bye bye.